Hello there, welcome to another IMVU toilet paper stream. So today we're going to do some more toilet papering, creatoring stuff. I'm going to try and make a toilet paper octopus pet. So for this, using Blender 2.82, what we need is the accessory file for this. So, which one? Female accessory, male accessory, doesn't really matter, they're both essentially the same. So drag and drop or open it from the file menu. Browse to wherever the file is. Need to double check our scaling because for some reason Blender always resets that. So 100. We also want to check sidebar our spacing, so view panel. It is at 1 meter, 2500, that's fine. So of course, to make our toilet paper octopus, we need to make a toilet paper roll. So as we did before, in previous tutorials, or previous streams I should say, I'm going to add mesh cylinder. And before we do anything to this, we need to edit the cylinder's properties. Reduce that down to, let's say, 16. That's a rather large toilet paper, so 50. Yep, 50 is about right. And then depth 100. Generate UVs, we can use that later. We want end gone, that's fine. Right, so that's our basic toilet roll. What we want to do to this, let's zoom in. Frame selected. Whoops, that's a bit close. Extreme close up. Edit mode. Select top face. Inset faces. It only seems to go so far for some peculiar reason, so let's try 30. Yep, that's about right, 30. That's okay. And then we want to extrude that down. Front. Extrude it down to the bottom. That's the tube. Get rid of this bottom face, we don't need it. And that face, we don't need that either. Select the top, duplicate that, and move that down to the bottom. So control to snap, there we go. Select all, and then just tidy that up. We get rid of, get rid of the extra vertices. Double check which way the faces are orientated, pointing. So select that red stuff. Mesh, normals, flip. So that is a basic toilet roll. Add some smoothing to this. So edge select, alt click the outer edge, alt click the inner edge. edge, sharp, do the same for the bottom. Then we can smooth this. Is that right? No. What's that in object mode? Object mode. Shade smooth, shade flat. So what's the difference between that and edit mode? Basically does the same thing, just called a different thing. Another one of Blender's idiosyncrasies. So add a modifier, edge split, and we want face angle disabled. You can do this in object data properties by enabling normals, so auto smooth. So if we disable that, enable auto smooth, it'll automatically smooth normals based on the angle that's set, or so the angle that's set, or any edges that are marked. Right, so let's add a material. So shading. We might have to reset the view. Yes, we do. So double check. Scale 100. One 2500. Right, so we don't have any materials assigned to this, so that's blank. So we want material properties, new, that'll populate, and then we'll call this bog roll. Square bracket 0, close square brackets. And then to this, all we want is a texture node. Drop that into place and connect color to base color. So color output, base color input, and then browse to the image that we'll be using, which is somewhere. There it is. Select, open. So there is the image assigned to the object, but not properly UV mapped. So with that in place, the material, we can now go and UV map that. So island selection, get these out of the way for the moment. Edges. Let's check the pattern. That looks okay. Where's the other one gone? So we need to do the inside as well. So that's just this weird shape at the moment because we extruded a loop that had a UV. And for this we want to select an edge and mark a seam. And select the inside and unwrap that. So press the U key or UV. Where is it? Unwrap, there it is. Let's focus in on that. Select the transform widget, rotate, hold Control to snap. Then we can add or move the UV to create the swirly inside of a cardboard tube. That's the inside. Now we have to unwrap the bottom, so we've got to split these. So we have to do the same sort of thing again. Mark a seam. Select, unwrap, so where's the seam? There's a seam. Right, so we've hidden or deselected, temporarily deselected one face so that we can move these two vertices apart from their neighbours so that we can then select and split this UV up, because what we need to do is manually lay this out like this. Because of the shape, it's difficult to get this to unwrap as a straight line or a straight section of UV. So we have to split the UV first in order to be able to do this, because all the UVs or the vertexes of the UVs are all attached to one another, and we have to split them first before we can start manipulating them. Alright, so that's that one. Let's flip this section around. We'll just do this roughly for now. That'll do for that side. Need to do the same thing again, so deselect one face so that we can select a couple of vertexes to split them so we can manipulate it. Rotate this section. So this is the rotate handle of the universal manipulation widget. And again, just roughly position them. And to do this quickly, just selecting the vertex and just pressing the G key, which is the shortcut. Right, so that's roughed out. UVs snap to pixels, corner. Select the entire UV, select all, and just do a quick rescale so that everything is snapped to the pixel. And then straighten these sections up. And again, there isn't necessarily a quick way to do this because Blender can't tell what it is that you actually want to do with the UV map. So the original shape was a circle or a wheel. Blender doesn't know that we want to flatten this out with all the sections, and there's no way for it to tell that that's what we want from a UV map. So this has to be done manually. So that's one. Almost there. And the reason for doing it this way is because it allows us a bit more room on the texture, or a bit more room. It makes more room available on the texture for us to use, because if we have two circles, the circles occupy quite a lot of space. So what we can do is for this edge pattern, or this side, this edge of the toilet roll, we can use a relatively small amount of space to get the effect that we're after. And this looks like it's upside down. Which UV are we working on? This one on the bottom, that's it. Want a small amount of overlap. That's the thickness of the cardboard tube. Same on the top. Need to move this, so select it and that is upside down, so we need to flip that. UV's mirror y-axis because we want an edge so if we exit edit mode, so we can see that there's a slight amount of bleed around this outside edge, which gives the impression of a cardboard tube as opposed to having a clean UV, which looks a bit too clean. So we can take advantage of some of the issues that crop up with texture bleeding, use those to our advantage. So that is the basic toilet roll. So what we can do now, let's save the file actually before we go any further. So file, save as, and this is accessories. Oh no, we've got a pets. Drop that in pets. TP pet. So we want to position this on the shoulder, left or right. Let's stick it on the right. So we're using the manipulation widgets just to position this where we want it to be. Just leave ourselves a bit of room for the next step. So that's the toilet paper roll, roughly where it needs to be. We need to edit mode, select all, object data properties. We need to create a vertex group. So click the plus sign, creates group, and we want this to be attachment root, and then assign, and then we can test that, deselect, select, and it'll select or deselect all the mesh structure. Next thing, object mode, we want to attach this to a bone, and I suspect what we'll want to use is the clavicle. So that's the left clavicle. That's the right clavicle. So that's the bone we want. So select the mesh, modifiers, we want to add an armature modifier, and this should be at the top of the stack. So we need to use the up-down navigation buttons, push that up to the top, object, click on the eyedropper, and then click on the bone that we're going to use, or the armature that we're going to use, and it'll appear as the object controlling the mesh. We can test this. Select the armature, switch into pose mode, select the bones, and just manipulate. So attachment root is the one that's actually controlling the object. So let's save this and then we can do a quick test export. Save as. To. So this is an accessory. So to export this properly, it's all out of pose mode. Deselect everything, so nothing is selected. File, export, FBX. We're in pets, TP-pet2. So not deselect, deselect selected objects. That should be disabled for this. Apply units, that's fine. Geometry, apply modifiers, that's fine. Armature, always deselect, add leaf bones. We don't need any animation, so disable that and then just export. Then to import, oh look, got a gift. So take a look at that later. So create mode, derive new product. So this is a female accessory. That's the glasses. So import the FBX. So FBX import, load FBX. We need the pets folder. Select open. And we want clavicle, 2 bones, 1 mesh. So with accessories, and this will be the same with standard pets, a pet is essentially just a glorified accessory item. We always tend to start with root node as our root bone, and then that will leave us 2 bones and 1 mesh. So we get all of these options with an accessory. So always select that and it'll show the object. Oh, we forgot to rename that. Configure FBX, there's our cylinder, and for female accessories the mesh ID is 2, for male it's 0. Apply scale 0.01, and it's brought in our material bogrel. So import. Couple of warnings. Apply changes, and there is our bogrel. So we need to attach this to RT. Have this spelled clavicle, CLEVICLE. And there is our toilet roll pet. And that will move relative to the avatar moving the clavicle. So to turn this into an octopus, toilet paper octopus, what have we got? Right, so yes, so to turn this into a toilet paper octopus, what we need to do is add a plane. That's probably added it at the bottom of the scene. It's large enough, that's okay. Size 200. What did we do for the width? 100. Right, so that is 1 sheet of toilet paper. We can assign our material to this that we created earlier. So material properties, browse, what's that? That's browse material to be linked. Bogrel. There's our bogrel. We need to UV map that. So press the U key. Which way round is it? Which way around is that? So that's right. So what we're going to do with this, shrink it down to fit. And what we want to do with this is, so that's it UV mapped. Edit mode. Edge select. Just going to do some extruding. Whoops. Not that way. So I'm holding Control down and clicking on the white outline because it wants to extrude. I'm not quite sure why the tool isn't visible at the top there. But that'll give us 4 sheets. Redo the UV map. Just about to see the pattern. Right, so what we're going to do with this, that's our base object. We're going to duplicate this. Shift D. That's 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. Doesn't matter too much about it going all over the place. 7. And then 8. There used to be a way of, oh there we go, text info, just turn that off to make it easier to see. So edit mode, going to add a loop cut to that, and then we're basically going to shove these vertexes up inside the toilet roll. We'll do that for all of them. So this could take some time. So we just get a rough shape to start with, just so that we can get everything into an approximate position. Whoops. So how many is that? 5. Six, 7, 8. So we're keeping these separate because, although this is a little fiddly and time consuming, if all of these are joined together, it's incredibly difficult to manipulate them individually when they are part of a group. So what we want to do here is, let's hide the toilet roll for a minute. So although we're not actually shoving the top of the toilet roll into the toilet roll, we've got to give that impression. So reduce the size of these bits that are at the top, and then we can slowly transition to full width sheets towards the bottom. And we can take advantage of any happy accidents because we don't want these to be, it's an organic shape, so it's best to use or utilize or take advantage of the happy accidents that happen as we are shaping the mesh. Let's click wireframe. Obviously we don't want to go too crazy with those so that we don't cause any undue mesh distortion. So we're going to, or we will, wrap some of these partially around the avatar. But we can see already that we've got almost the basics of a toilet paper octopus. And this is the last one. So that is the basics of the toilet paper octopus. So let's save this, because what we need to do now that we've got these basic shapes in, what we need to do now is adjust some of these so that instead of just draping down the back of the avatar, so for example this one, we could wrap that round the neck or around the shoulder blade, or do something a little bit more interesting. Same with some of the other ones as well. So we'll edit them individually. So we'll use the outliner. We'll use the outliner to hide, show and hide each of these as we edit them, so that we're not looking at this massive mess of mesh structure. So let's just save that. Save as number 3. So let's just name these so we can see them more easily. we'll create a new collection. So new, all the way down to the bottom. Move that to the top. And drop our meshes in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the plane. Whoops. Right, so what we can do now is hide each of the tentacles until we get, so we don't need to edit, well actually with this one we do edit the top a little bit. So with this one, let's have this just draped as it currently is. Hanging down. Whoops. So the position of these, we've got two options essentially. We can either position these closer to the avatar, so we're actually sitting on, or not sitting directly on it, but we're sitting as close to the profile of the avatar as possible. But that basically means that the object, when it's used, will only work or appear okay if the avatar is wearing something that's skin tight. For use where people have other items on their avatar, clothing, thick jackets, etc., it's always a good idea to compensate for the thickness that might be afforded by the clothing that is worn. So set the distance of your object slightly proud of the avatar so that you don't unnecessarily clip through. And this would be the, oh, there's an extra face there. This would be the same for other accessories, because essentially, as we said at the very beginning, a pet is basically a glorified accessory. So it functions on the same rules, the same conditions. So if it was an item of jewellery where it's to sit skin close, then you can, for a ring for example, so you would put your ring or bracelet and it would be much closer to the skin of the avatar. But for other things where they might sit on top of clothing, you want to be aware of compensating for the fact that they are wearing something. So that's one. Number two, so probably do, whoops, a twist on this. So global, let's switch the orientation to local. That's not good enough, so let's try normal. That's a little bit better. Whoops. So those orientations, those rotation orientations, allow us to rotate the selection in a particular direction based on the type of element that we've got selected. So we have to think, and again with something like this, in normal use, the avatar doesn't stand with its arms akimbo like this. The arms are normally down by the side. So we have to imagine, so it's going to be about that much space taken up. So we have to imagine the position of the object. So in this instance, it's the tentacles. We have to imagine the tentacles draped over the shoulder, following the arm down. And that could mean a couple of attempts, trial and error, exporting, testing, making some adjustments, and then testing again. That's another one. So for example, this one, we should probably have to twist that right round. And again, we're imagining the shoulder is bent and it comes down here, so we're imagining what's going to have to happen to this shape to get it to, well, look right more than necessarily sit right on the mesh. So it'll clip through the arm at the moment because we're using the accessory file which has the arms akimbo like this, but in actual use it won't do that. That's another one. And where possible, we're trying to make use of happy accidents. As Bob Ross would say. So that. So this one, was it that one or number 6? Yeah, so for 6, so let's just adjust number 6 and we'll have this wrap around the neck. Or will it go around the neck? Haven't really got enough structure for that. So let's see how far we can go. And again, we need to compensate for clothing that might be worn. But in instances like this, we can opt for adding a little bit more structure. Give us more to play with. So if we temporarily put the toilet roll back in place, you can see how it's wrapping around the avatar's neck. Basically trying to grab onto the avatar. So for number 5, so that's arm number 6. So we do the same sort of thing for number 5, but for the back. So this is the one that's going to go around the shoulders and waist. Again, give ourselves a bit more room. And a bit more structure that we need. So loop cut. Loop cut, loop cut. Whoops. So that's edge slide, double tap the G key. So what we want to do, we might be able to get rid of that extra edge that we put in there. So double tap G, and that one double tap G. Now let's leave those. Need to watch out for overlap. Whoops. So that's 5 and 6, 7. We can do something similar with that, but across the front. Whoops. That's going to wrap around the boobies. So we need a bit more structure here, so loop. loop. It's a very personable octopus. Again, we're allowing for any clothing that might be worn. Might have to turn this into a body part, because the thing about accessories is that once you start shaping things across and around the body, well, we'll see. We'll see in a moment. But the problem with this approach to doing accessories is that an accessory is a fixed item. It only moves relative to itself. So if we wanted these toilet paper tentacles to move with the avatar as an accessory, it won't do that. It'll only do that as essentially a clothing item, a glorified clothing item. So that's tentacle 7, and then tentacle 8. And what you want to do as well is, when you are manipulating the edge loops, so a loop is a series of edges. So an edge loop is essentially just a continuous selection of edges. Whoops. So that's an edge loop, that's an edge loop, that is, and that is. So what you want to try and do is orientate your edge loops relative to the avatar that's underneath it and the structural flow of the mesh. So this is the flow of the mesh. Ideally, what we want to try and do is orientate our edges to follow that flow, so we have a much more natural sequence of edges, vertexes and faces, and that'll make it easier for the mesh to distort depending on how the product or the mesh is eventually set up, whether it just remains as a simple glorified accessory stroke pet, or something else. So that's the boob. It's grabbing onto that. So these are tentacles, and that is the toilet paper octopus. So we've got a bit of crossover that we need to address. So we can pull that under there, grab that, oops, and we're going to get quite a bit of clipping, so all we're going to try and do at this point is just minimize it. It's at the top. No, it's not. So what we want to do now, save the file, save as for now. What to do next? Okay, so what we're going to do, select all of them. Going to duplicate them. And we're going to join those together. So make one the active, Control J. Then hide all the original ones so that we have those as reference. Oh, did we miss one? No. Call that tentacles. Whoops. Smoothing. Check our UV maps. So select all. How much stretching is there? That's not too bad. Might have to redo these longer ones. So shift click, unwrap, and of course it distorts because the shape that we've been making is a distorted UV map. So double check with snapped pixels we are. So we have to straighten these out again. select one of the other ones. So we have a scale reference. So we're selecting the island. Whoops. We want this to be the same height, but it's not going to be the same width or length. But that addresses the additional structure that we put in place and the stretching. So I have to do that to this one. And wrap, and that's even wonkier. Let's go full screen, so that's Control space bar. And we don't want to fix this too much because we're relying on the fact that the UV map is getting distorted by this distribution of the UVs, and that visually can be used to represent scrunched up toilet paper. So we don't want to necessarily make this all formal, so the structure of the UV is basically a rectangle with the UV down the center, or the division, so everything is all equidistant, so everything is more or less the same sort of size. We'll get some distortion anyway from doing that, but following the natural inclination of the UVs allows us to play around with the natural distortion that occurs. Again, so it plays around with the natural distortion so that it looks like scrunched up toilet paper or scrunched up texture, whatever the texture is. So at the same height again. And different length. So there was that one and possibly this one as well. So same thing again, so Control space bar, that goes full screen. So we can leave that going all wonky like that, doesn't really matter. Exit. So select one of the other ones, so we have scale reference, shortcut, and then scale up. So we're dragging that corner. So the universal widget is for the UVs. So the universal widget that we've got active, that brings up this manipulation tool. So the edges, the outer border, that allows us to manipulate in a specific direction on all four sides. The corners, they translate directionally on a diagonal, but scale the UV. So all four do the same thing, scaling in different directions. The center bit, that X, that's our movement manipulation. And then the little knobble, or knobbly bit at the top, that allows us to rotate. And of course, if you hold Control key down whilst doing any of those, it snaps to the grid. So that is that sorted out. Layout, textured view, deselect all. So let's save this, save as number 5. So we can do a test now. So this is, again, it's just a standard glorified accessory. So it'll come in as an accessory item. So we need to join the tentacles to the roll. So select them, Control J, join them together. Need to make sure that we've assigned the vertex group to everything. So edit mode, select all, and then click the assign button. Then just test. And then we can double check that. Select the armature, pose mode, select the bone, test which one, and there's the paper octopus being controlled by that armature. So all we need to do now is do a test export. So out of pose mode, make sure nothing is selected. And then File, Export, FBX. What are we on? Number 5. So we want that to be 5. You can keep the old one as reference. So again, selected objects, disable. That forces, and this is it's not a bug so much as it's just something that you have to do often with accessory files, anything to do with an accessory. And it forces Blender to export everything that's contained in the scene, which then can be filtered out, so we can filter out the bits that we need and the bits that we don't need. Blah 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 blah, that's okay. Geometry, apply modifiers, that's okay. Armature, always again disable add leaf bones. Don't need any baked animations, so export FBX. So IMVU. So that's the initial test that we did. So create, derive new product, accessory, and go. So that's the default. Import the FBX. So FBX import, load FBX. Then we want number 5, open. And again, make sure that we always select the one that starts with root node, and then it'll have the bone name that the vertex group is associated with, and that'll typically be 2 bones and 1 mesh. And this time it should show the name of the, there it is, bog rule. Confirm. So again, female accessory, so this is mesh ID 2. Materials okay. 0.01. Import. Success. Blah 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 blah. Import changes. Apply changes. And there is our bog roll octopus, but it's attached to the wrong bone. So config. And this is RT Apply changes, and there is our bog roll octopus, and you can see how we compensated for the shoulder. What a cutie patootie. obviously with it being white on a white background. So let me just furniture. So there we go. There's our octopus. Our octopus bog roll. So, what else is there? Meshes, that's okay. We haven't done... Oh, yes, so we need two-sided for this material because we are using planes. So always make sure that's enabled, otherwise we'll see through it. We'll see through the tentacles. So enable that. Then we can see the backs of those. We don't need blending. Let's save this, save as. So that's conformed quite well to the avatar. There's a bit of clipping on the boob. So you'd have to go back into Blender and pull these vertexes away from the torso a little bit to give us a bit more room. But other than that, it looks okay. There's a bit of clipping there on the shoulder as well, but that's not as noticeable because it's hidden. But what we can do in the next video, in the next stream, is add a chibi face or whatever they're called. So it'll essentially just be a plane added to the object that'll have that'll be mapped to a square texture. So what we'll do is add a square plane to the object and then UV map that to a square texture that can be broken up into a grid with a different face on each one that will then allow the face to animate. And we can also add some vertex painting as well. So that is what we'll do in the next one, which will be in the next day or two. So whenever the next stream is, that will be when it is. So for now, we'll call it quits there, and that is how you make a toilet paper octopus pet as an accessory item. Make this derivable when we get it into the shop. So we shall see you on the next stream, where we'll continue our adventures of the toilet paper octopus. Bye for now.